1. Hi, I am a 28-year-old female. Today I'm going to rant about my absurd entitled aunt. She is my mom's older sister. My mom is the youngest in her family, and being an accidental child, she has huge age differences between her and her 3 other siblings. Her oldest brother is 13 years older than her, and her sister, the entitled aunt, is 9 years older than her. And she has one more brother who is 8 years older than her. Entitled aunt has been a bit mean to my mom since she was a child, often snitching to grandma about her, belittling her looks, and making sure she got a thrashing whenever possible. I don't think she was entirely evil, because I do have memories where she doted on me and my brother, but at some point she started becoming entitled again. Because of the age difference, there is a huge difference between me and her older 2 children, a son who is 12 years older than me and a daughter 8 years older than me. Her youngest, a boy, is a year younger than me, because he, like my mom, was an accidental baby. We still kind of get along, and he is tolerable, not like entitled aunt. Or at least so to me and my family. My mom was quite lonely, and often consulted entitled aunt for advice regarding how to handle things, because she was mentally depressed thanks to dad, EM, and family, and some of her friends were busy competing and pulling her even more down. It didn't help that I was becoming quite difficult to handle as I was being bullied in school, and had started lashing out not knowing how to handle things. Anyways, on to the story. Being bullied and isolated and betrayed numerous times. Let's just say I became quite warped and introverted. My aunt pointed to my mom that since I was doing badly at school and such a troublemaker, she should worry for my future. Since I was 3, I always wanted to go to medical school. She would tell me sweetly that I would achieve it, but then give my mom snide remarks about how I was clueless in life. Joke's on her. Not only did I get into med school, I have completed my specialization, residency, and currently working in my alma mater. When her daughter was in high school, entitled aunt forced her to get into med school and become a school trooper to rub it in my mom's face, but my cousin didn't make it, and she paid an expensive college tuition for a different college course. During my last years of high school, I studied my butt off and was accepted to medical school in Delhi, India. At that time, my dad was abroad and I had studied in an IB school, but since I was unable to write the entrance exam for medical school for India, I worked hard to get accepted as a government nominee, since my dad had been deputed by the Indian Navy. I achieved the nominee seat, although it took 2 months for the final result. And I joined a month late, but I was ecstatic as I had achieved my dream. I posted on Facebook about being accepted. Now this is where all hell broke loose. One of my cousins saw my post and told their parent. My mom got an earful from entitled aunt. My mom put the call on speaker so my dad can also help handle her. Why didn't you tell me she got in? EA, what a pleasure. What are you talking about? Don't play, it's OP. How does she get into medical school? Oh, how do you know? We were planning to tell everyone tomorrow after we completed OP's admission work. She posted on Facebook. I thought there were issues with her admission. Oh, OP's admission actually had nothing to do with it, so she has her admission approved. My mom is a real pacifist. She did not work hard for it, how could she get an admission? EA, you said it would be nice if she got in because it would be nice to have our first female doctor. Why are you behaving like this? This is my daughter's admission she stole. Your daughter stole my daughter's future. All 3 of us were stunned. I had come to accept my EA had become some sort of Karen at some point in my life, but this... My dad was fuming, on the other hand, so he took the phone. EA, this is Dad. My daughter worked hard for this. She stayed up sleepless at night and took extra classes to achieve this. She deserved this more than anyone. And how the hell did she steal your daughter's so-called admission? I mean, there's an 8-year difference between them. My daughter was still in elementary school when your daughter was applying for college. Plus, your daughter was applying in Bangalore while mine applied in Delhi. If you cannot be happy for my daughter's happiness, you don't deserve to be her aunt. Your daughter is never going to make it through med school after all that fortune teller told me that she would run away and marry some bum when before she turned 19. The gleeful snide in her voice made me cringe. I cleared my voice to ask how she thinks I'll find a guy to run away with when I'm going to an all-girls school in Delhi. But my dad stopped me. OP is stronger than you think. My dad cut the call and ranted about her while my mom cried. Entitled aunt continued to rant to other family members and friends that I stole her daughter's future and my admission was a scam. I was least bothered because by now I had almost no contact with my relatives and my maternal grandparents supported me. My aunt kept taking every chance to belittle and humiliate me, and grew upset as I ignored her and continued working hard. She visited Delhi when I was nearly completing my third-year med school exams. She hated that my professors liked me, and I had made friends who genuinely cared about me. I had the last laugh. I completed medical school without wasting time, completed my specialization, and I'm now working back at my alma mater. Now she pesters my mom about my marriage because I had told her to hug a landmine and butt out of my life. Entitled aunt is crazy, and I don't know if she will ever be the kind of aunt I once remember her to be. 2. I'm a regular train rider, or at least I was when I was in high school. I would take the train from my hometown to the city my grandparents live in every long weekend or holiday, so I had my train routine down to a T. Delays were common, but that was part of the experience. On long rides like this, and noticing kids get restless, I would let them watch a movie or draw on the Paint app with my computer. This ride was different, though. EM was another semi-regular and had a habit of verbally abusing the attendants. EM sat across from me this ride, and the entire time her son was being such a disruption, and I just tried my best to ignore them, since EM did nothing to settle them down. Like I said, I'd usually offer to help out by providing a distraction, but frankly, her son was destructive and I didn't trust them. I also happened to be having a stroke of creative genius and was working on an original musical, getting more done in hours than I had in months. Unfortunately, at one point EM made eye contact with me and motioned for me to take my earbuds out. I did, and still don't fully understand the convo that followed. "Do you think my son could watch a movie on your computer? I can't get him to calm down." She hadn't even tried, but okay. "Sorry, maybe in a bit, but I'm working right now." "You've done it for other kids." "I know, but I wasn't working then, and if you're okay with waiting, your son can use it later, but not right now." She grumbled a bit about me being a lying teenager, but turned back to her phone. After a while, the son kept coming up to ask if he could use it yet, and that EM said he could. He kept coming, I kept saying no. He kept being a little brat the rest of the time, he wasn't pestering me. Eventually, EM tapped me on the shoulder. "Yes?" "He needs to use your computer, I cannot deal with him anymore." "Honestly, I don't want to let him use it at all now. You guys keep bothering me and distracting me from my work." "It's summer, you don't have any work." "You don't know that. What do you think I've been doing since you guys got on? Working. I'm doing something important and you guys won't back off." "I'll tell you if your son can use it when I'm ready to let him." "You can do it later." "No, I can't." "Would it kill you to just let him use it?" "Yeah, if I let him use it now. Just wait." EM, once again disgruntled, turned back to her seat and travel companion and started shit-talking me again. Eventually, writer's block hit me and I shut down my writing programs and moved my bag under my seat and offered to let the son watch a movie. Apparently, I committed 2 crimes at this point. Despicable Me was not good enough. EM insisted that the son bring my computer into their seating area. And that was when my patience was through. "What do you think you're doing? Letting your son watch a movie?"
"I don't want to watch Despicable Me."
"No, he needs to sit with us." She let him run around between cars unattended all day, but okay. "I mean, you're right there, you can still watch him, and I only have a few kids' movies, and I thought this was better than Frozen or The Little Mermaid. I have a younger sister, she likes princesses." He sighed and just started watching. But EM stood and grabbed the computer off of the tray in front of her son and I. I was livid and snatched my computer back. "He has to sit with us." "Not with my computer, he doesn't." As she was cussing me out, I grabbed my bag and left to the window car. The amount of light gave me a headache, but I just vented to the attendant, who I knew well, and they vented back to me about her crappy behavior. He gave me a free hot chocolate, and I tipped him $40 because I only had to deal with her for half the journey. he would have to deal with it for the rest of the long, long day. Apparently, she got banned a few months later for hitting one of the attendants after an 8-hour delay. 3. I work in the retail sector of a popular after-school program for children, and we run 2 large property summer camps in the area, amongst other things. This incident takes place at my shop, and not the camps, but pertains to the camps. Within the organization, there is a way for kids to earn gift cards via fundraising. The cards can be used in my shop or be used for activities such as camp. One day, a mother and her child were in the store buying some camp merch with one of these cards. Playing up the mask of the friendly customer service connoisseur, I asked the little girl if she was going to that camp property this summer. She responded with a seemingly amicable, "Yes, I'm going to Property T because I don't like Property S." At first I thought nothing of this remark, as the 2 properties are pretty different in regards to what they offer, and most of the kids have preferences. For example, one hosts a fully functioning farm with livestock, and the other has a high ropes course. But before I could continue this line of thought by asking what she liked best about Property T, her mother decided to cut in. "My daughter was bullied at Property S." Again, not the most outlandish thing, kids can be pretty vicious to each other. I expressed my sympathies and stated that I hoped she would have a better experience with her time at Property T. Only to have this tacked on like an afterthought by the mother. "Yeah, the counselors bullied her." My brain pretty much hit the brakes. The counselors bullied a 10-year-old? This immediately set off alarm bells in my head. I've met many of our company's counselors, they're all lovely. Regardless, though, as a mandatory reporter, I decided to further inquire to get some clarification. If the kid was bullied by adult staff, I need to make sure the proper repercussions were carried out. So I asked how the child was mistreated. The mother replied, "Well, she was kicked out of camp." Another pause. We rarely kick kids out of camp. It's so unusual, in fact, that I couldn't recall it happening at all in at least a handful of years. Our counselors are well trained at de-escalating situations. So now I was suspicious, and I also knew I wasn't going to get anything honest out of the mother. I turned to the child and asked her what happened at camp, stating that I want to make sure she had a good experience this year, and that if there was a problem that could be fixed, I could take the information to the right people to get that done. The conversation went as follows.
"I was just trying to help them."
Help who? What did they need help with?
"They weren't being good mermaids."
Note, the previous summer we had hosted a mermaid-themed camp that focused on swimming. Oh, so you were a good mermaid, right?
"Yes, I was the best mermaid because I stayed underwater."
Suddenly I knew exactly where this was going, and unfortunately, I did not do a good job of hiding it. I let out a very nervous laugh, and the mother started glaring at me. "So, you were helping the other mermaids?"
"Yep, they wouldn't stay underwater, so I made them."
I glanced at the mother out of the corner of my eyes, fully expecting the vicious scowl I was met with. It was clear then that her child was a precious angel in her mind, and definitely not someone who was confessing to attempting to drown multiple children. Regardless, I persisted, using my best chipper customer service voice. "You helped them be better mermaids. How?"
"I held their heads underwater."
Yep, there it was. Did they ask you to do that?
"No."
I didn't need to know any more, nor could I continue to ask without risking some hella Karen wrath from her mama bear looming over me. So I changed the subject and said, "Well, I hope you have a good time at Property T this summer," thinking that, at the very least, that property doesn't have a lake in which this kid can drown her fellow campers. Afterwards, the mother broached the subject again at checkout. She went on a long-winded rant about how mean the counselors were for kicking her ickle baby out of camp, as well as elaborated that the kid had only dunked someone a couple of times and there wasn't any serious harm, before asking if I would look into the incident, to which I replied that I would. And I did, speaking to a counselor at a much later staff meeting to learn that the little girl had no less than 6 people underwater despite multiple warnings and timeouts from activities whenever she was caught doing it. Her banishment was done reluctantly, after she forced someone down so long the other kid was coughing up water when they were finally released. And this was after they pretty much had to glue a counselor to the aggressor's side at all times. A counselor who, at this final incident, finally struggled to pull the offending kid off the drowning child. She was quite a bit bigger than her same-aged peers, and bit, hit, and scratched the counselor that attempted to restrain her. Of course, in alluding to looking into the incident, I had unknowingly invited the mother to pester the shit out of me for the foreseeable future. She came in quite a few times that year, never buying anything, to ask about my progress. It was pretty clear that she had already been rightfully dismissed by those in the organization with much more authority than me, and had latched onto my goodwill to try and gain some sort of retribution to her special muffin being bullied. In the end, though, all that happened was that we had to discontinue the mermaid-themed summer camp, as no one that was on staff that year wanted to risk a repeat, let alone a worse outcome. Should a similarly minded child ever attend again? 4. Background. My parents divorced when I was in the 1st grade. It was a bad marriage, and they are both better people for it. But my father sure blew it up at the end. It's kind of hard to argue that point when his mother and sisters both took my mom's side. Oh well? These details are important to understand, as my father had a long, bad track record with women. He has grown up quite a bit, and he's a better person than he appears in this story too, so let's just take it as read that he understands and has spent years making up for his oversights regarding his children, you will see later on. My stepmom is awesome. She and my father have been together for a couple of decades, and she makes him a better person. This story is not about her, it's about my almost stepmom. Let's call her Salty Chica, or Salty for short. Main story. My father got together with Salty a few years after the divorce. He then moved far, far away with her. She was a full-time student returning to grad school after deciding her current academic field was full of horrible people. She was convinced all of these changes were going to improve her life immeasurably. It didn't. My older sister, who was, at this point undiagnosed, bipolar, immediately hated her. I couldn't tell why. Then again, I didn't really learn how to pick up on social cues until my 20s, so I didn't really understand the problem. Besides, sister was awful with everyone, so why would she take to Salty? Salty reciprocated the feelings in a pretty obvious way. The difference here is that she was closing in on 40 and my sister was still in middle school. Have you ever seen a public screaming match between a child and a grown-ass woman? I have. One time they were on a trip together along with my father, and my sister got quite sick, ending up in the hospital overnight. Salty was furious. She was asked to leave the waiting room as she was unable to control her volume in voicing her displeasure at how my sister ruined their vacation. My father, who is not knowing for being outwardly paternal, ripped her a new one, and indeed a third one, out in the parking lot. I only learned this detail some years later, when being relayed this story. I imagine security guards were involved, but that may be a 20-year-old's memory distortion at work. Perhaps a little. Lots of residual hatred towards her. She never forgave my sister for that incident and would occasionally bring it up because... There are numerous little incidents. Examples screaming at a cyclist to fornicate himself when she was walking in the bike lane. But the biggest one was her engagement, an engagement announcement. I flew out to far, far away as a birthday present. Salty decided that she would spend my birthday weekend in wine country. I was turning 13. The evening before we left to go for our day trip, my father and Salty told me that they were planning to marry in a few months. My sister and I were to be the only attendees. Super. Well, wine country sucked. Salty made 2 sandwiches. I can still taste them. They were revolting. I was not a picky eater at all, but it was horrific. It was some kind of experimental fermented something or other. To my great credit, I ate the first one with no obvious negative reaction. Then, with Salty within earshot, my father said, "Aren't you going to eat the other one?" "I'm not hungry. That one was enough." I think you should eat the other one. Dad, I'm trying to lose weight. You really should eat the other one. You see where this is going. I was ill for the rest of the day. Not that it mattered too much, as I wasn't allowed to enter most of the wineries they visited. Apparently wine country wasn't really kid-friendly. Who knew? They had a great time inside, though my father was getting increasingly concerned about me. It may have seemed to him like acting out, but if it was, I seemed pretty damn committed. Anyway, what felt like 34 years later, about 7 of your Earth hours, we showed up for our dinner reservation. I could not eat. Salty lost her mind. Everyone was looking at us. I was trying to hide under the table. Then, for the first time and only time, I have seen him go Papa Bear, at least on my behalf. I have witnessed Kodiak Dad come out of the cave a couple of times for my sister's benefit, and ripped into her hard. Like, we have to leave this very fancy restaurant now, because if we don't, the manager is going to call the cops and tell them to bring a couple more guys bad. The multi-hour car ride home was tense. At some point, Salty tried to put a CD in so we wouldn't have to listen to the deafening silence. She failed several times, then snapped the CD in frustration. My father and I laughed. She was not amused. We kept chuckling. We were going to be okay, he and I. The next morning, they were no longer engaged. I was still unwell, though I recovered enough to fly home the day after. A few months later, she finished her program, moved a few time zones away, and sold their shared car without telling my dad. Epilogue. 2 weeks after the Wicked Witch of the Midwest was out of our lives, Glenda, my fairy stepmother, showed up in my dad's life, and all became right in the kingdom. Salty, on the other hand, found more trolls under her new bridge, tried moving back with her parents, and found the same people making her life miserable had followed her there. And then tried to rekindle with my father, who had learned his lesson about messing with dark magic, and told her to find a falling house. And yes, I still hold the sandwich thing over his head. 5. This story took place about a month ago, and still makes me angry because of the lack of care these parents had for their kids, or even for the people around them. In fact, it didn't seem like they were entitled at all, but just oblivious. So for a quick background, I work as a hostess in one of the main restaurants in a popular resort. We're the only restaurant on property that opens for breakfast, and although we use menus, we tend to run buffets when our occupancy is high enough to keep up with the large crowd. The buffet pretty much has what you'd expect, like eggs, bacon, cereal, and pastries we bake in-house, and we usually run it from 6 to 11, or until we run out of food, which rarely happens. We tend to get rushes closer to 9 a.m. on most days, but on Sundays, when people are checking out, it can start earlier depending on what kind of guests we have. Obviously, just like any buffet, we have tongs and spoons to serve the food, and it's a self-serve system. It was close to maybe 9 or 10 on Sunday when this story happened, and I was the hostess for the day. We were starting to pick up in business at the time, but it wasn't going to be packed until the next hour or so, when the restaurant would start shifting to lunch, and the checkout time would begin in the lobby. I'm standing at the host desk arranging tables on a computer when I'm approached by our stars of the show, 3 ladies, probably in their early to mid-30s, and their 4 sons, all around 7 or 8 years old. The moment I start to greet them, the boys all run past me into the restaurant, where they all start chasing each other around tables, chairs, and even servers. I look up at the ladies and internally sigh as I notice not one of them has noticed what was going on, and were either talking to me or to each other. And immediately I knew this was going to be trouble. Now, something you should know about me is that I can be somewhat of a goody two-shoes. When I see people, even kids, misbehaving in any way, I get really frustrated, and sometimes feel like it's my job to do something about it, even when it's not my place. I'm a little more understanding with children because, well, they're kids. Most kids don't learn the real meaning behind right and wrong until they're likely in the double digits, so I try to think that it's fine when the parents intervene. Another thing is that I have ADHD, and tend to get easily emotional depending on specific circumstances. I can be easily excited, stressed, angry, or sad, and if I let them run too much, then I often act on them, such as saying or doing something that wouldn't exactly be acceptable in various circumstances. It can be anywhere from being too loud, saying something personal in the heat of the moment, or revealing opinions that are better kept private than said out loud. And it was better to stay quiet and let things play out, but in this moment I couldn't help but saying something. "Excuse me, ma'am, can you call your kids back before they get hurt?" I kid you not, it was like this woman just woke up from a trance when I said this, because her first response was, "Oh, right." And she started calling for the kids to come back as I took them to a table. I know it wasn't my place, but part of me thought that maybe bringing attention to the situation would make things easier. Maybe the ladies would control their kids once they were inside the restaurant, and maybe I just had distracted them. I thought maybe they were just tired or something. I was wrong. As the hour continued, the restaurant started filling up a lot more, meaning more people walking around the restaurant. I was busy for a while, so I didn't really pay attention to the ladies' table until about half an hour had passed, and by that point, the boys were right back to treating the restaurant like a playground, and had added a game of catch to their list of activities. They seemed to be having lots of fun throwing a large stuffed animal in the air with all their strength, without paying much attention to the fully occupied tables they were inches away from hitting. There was one man in particular, an elderly fellow, who was inches away from being hit by the toy multiple times. He was not oblivious to this fact, and I noticed relatively quickly that he was glaring at me a few times. Since I was busy and had given it to a server already, there wasn't much I could do at the moment, nor could their server. I just kind of hoped it'd stop before it'd get worse, but it took way too long for it to. And then it was 11, and for the first time I had ever seen, we had to close down because some of the stations were out of food. It was definitely a busy day for sure. As usual, we started informing guests about last call, as we'd start transitioning to lunch and getting rid of the food. At this point, the boys had stopped playing around, and I noticed one of the ladies with her son in tow was filling a to-go container with pastries to take with her. This wasn't a bad thing, since the food was going to be tossed at the end anyway, but I did notice something else. The woman, tongs in hand, picked up one of the pastries from the station and started to feed her child with our tongs. I just stood there in complete shock, wondering if I had seen that right as she, without any hesitation, turned back to the station and put the tongs back. There was no flinching, scolding, or any attempt to call over a staff member to replace the tongs. She just walked away. And that's when I pretty much snapped and went into full-on hyper-focused anger. I quickly charged over to the station and grabbed the tongs before ducking into the kitchen, where a few of my coworkers were. I didn't say anything to the woman at all, but I did say something to my coworkers. I exploded. It wasn't my proudest moment, and I could have controlled myself better, but I just couldn't keep it in at that point. I just unloaded how angry I was at that person. A grown woman could do something like that, while my coworkers were stunned. They had known about that table's behavior the whole morning, and had told me to ignore it, but none of them had expected this to happen at all. However, I'll admit that in that moment, I was likely too loud, and when I turned to leave, the thought that my voice might have reached the restaurant sunk in. I was embarrassed, but I was still really angry, and I placed a new set of tongs on the buffet. I heard someone next to me say, "Sorry about that." I didn't look to see exactly who it was, if it was the woman, her friends, or just a sympathetic witness, but I just replied rather curtly and without making eye contact that it was not okay to do something like that, especially since we were still hot off the heels of the pandemic at the time. Heck, our workplace had only lifted the mask mandate that month after a handful of employees came back from quarantine, including me, by the way. I faintly remember saying more, maybe even being a little more mean, but that was the gist of it. Again, it was wrong to be angry, but dang it, you'd expect grown people to act better than that, especially when they're in front of their kids. Their kids, not to mention. I feel like I've personally been punished for doing something like that when I was probably 5 years old. It's just not appropriate at all, and not something I'd expect from even the most entitled parents. Regardless, they ended up paying and leaving not long after as the crowd died down significantly. I apologized profusely to my coworkers about being so angry and acting out on that. I'm not defending my actions, and if I could do that all again, I would in a heartbeat. Surprisingly, a lot of my coworkers actually agreed with what I did and said it was justified. In fact, one even said that the woman deserved a taste of humility, and maybe she'd learn from that. And replacing the tongs then and there was a good call. And for those who might be curious, I made a personal apology to the server as well, who laughed and said she didn't care and she would have done the same thing too. She, of course, didn't get a tip. She said it wasn't a surprise because those ladies were jerks to her from the start. Please, 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 don't treat a buffet like your personal plate. And also to that random gentleman who almost got hit in the head by a stray Spider-Man doll. Thanks for being patient, and I hope you end up having a good day. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to The Impractical Proudness of Parents, iPop, episode 82. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. If you enjoyed the video, then please do the... Yep, do that, that's good. You know what to do. You've been here before. And if you haven't been here before, I'd like you to like and leave a little comment, but we'll get to the comment part in a minute. Right, now we do have no birthday shout-outs, but we do have a little shout-out to the author of the last story, the story with the buffet. I say buffet instead of buffet, or buffet, because I'm fancy. And this shout-out goes to Crispy Cakes. Ooh, delicious. Crispy Cakes are good. I wouldn't eat them because they're a human being, but Crispy Cakes are good. Right, now, today's Easter. Yes, I'm certain it's Easter now, because there's no doubt in my mind about that, because you didn't see the last take. But, let's see, Easter-related questions, what can we do? Something about eggs. Alright, favorite type of eggs? I think I know the answer to this. Is it do you like the fancy, now if you're an adult and you still get eggs, specifically aimed at you, do you like the fancy adult-themed eggs that are all mature and kind of boring looking? Or do you like the ones that you'd give to younger people? You know, like your Cadbury's and companies whose names we won't mention, and other ones as well. Leave your answers in a comment below. You could send it on a stamped addressed envelope, but it'd never get to me because there's nowhere you can send it to. I closed the P.O. box down, just in case you're wondering. Okay, I think we're done for now. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. Going to go eat stuff. Not people, just stuff. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.